Sonic the Hedgehog, the fastest thing alive, the blue blur, whatever you call him. This blue hedgehog has been speeding around video games in our hearts since 1991. Sega hit it big when Sonic came around. Even to this day, the blue hedgehog has become one of the most iconic video game characters out there, and he definitely does not show any signs of stopping there. Whether it's the games, merchandise, and more recently the very successful movie franchise, Sonic has personally meant a lot to me ever since I was a little kid. My grandfather had introduced me to the blue hedgehog because he had a Genesis at his house, and honestly, it changed my life. The majority of my love for Sonic has come from playing the games over the years, but also Sonic was one of the first, I think if not the first, character based off of a video game or a cartoon that I ever drew on paper. And even back when I was like 5 years old, I said to myself, I want to keep practicing until I can draw Sonic right. Many years of practice have followed, and I can draw Sonic beautifully these days, which in return helped develop my art skills as an artist. So I definitely have a lot to thank Sonic for. Well, regardless of that stuff, for this video, I want to go through my personal top 10 Sonic games. Now, keep in mind, this is just from my own point of view, so it's possible that my list might be a little bit different than yours. But that's A-okay. I'm always eager to see what everybody's favorite games are, no matter how many top 10 lists I watch. But with that being said, let's begin the list. Kicking things off at number 10, Sonic CD. So even though the Sega CD was a complete failure, it did at the very least have some good games. Just a shame that they weren't sold well. One of them being Sonic CD. Updated graphics, the time travel mechanics, not to mention 2 kick-ass soundtracks, depending on where you got the game from. This is also the title in which we are introduced to Amy Rose and Metal Sonic, 2 very iconic characters to this day. Sonic CD is definitely one of the better Sonic games out there, although I have to admit it can be a little confusing in some parts if you're not familiar with the time travel mechanics, but once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad. I personally myself still have not gotten the good ending, only the bad one, but I still want to keep on trying until I get the good one someday. Not to mention, who could forget the iconic opening to this game courtesy of Toei Animation? Hell, even all these years later, it's still beautiful to look at. Whether it's the past, present, or future, you can guarantee Sonic is there to save the day. Number 9. Sonic Advance. Back in the early 2000s, this was around the time when Sega stopped making consoles and began putting their titles onto different platforms, including Nintendo. So it was a huge deal when we saw Sonic games popping up on like the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. With Sonic Advance here, it was taking what made the Genesis games really good and taking it on the go with the Game Boy Advance. Now, out of the 3 Advance games, I personally like the first one the most. Advance 2 and 3 were good, but I honestly hated the special rings in Advance 2, otherwise that game would have been on the list instead. Advance 3, the team mechanics were nice, but in some spots I felt they felt kind of flat. To me, Advance 1 is the best. It's a nice mixture of classic and modern. I remember a younger me going, wow, I could take Sonic with me on the go on my Game Boy Advance. Ah, good times. But even all these years later, Advance 1 is still fun to play. Not to mention, in this game there is also the tiny Chow Garden, taking one little Chow with you on the go. And if you had that special cable that connects to your GameCube, you could send your Chow from there to the adventure games. I got mine, although I haven't used it in quite a long time. Oops! But yes, Advance 1, very good title. Number 8. Sonic Colors. I remember around the time when Colors came out, it was during a time in which people were hoping for something identical to one half of Sonic Unleashed. That was pretty much what Sonic Colors did, taking the mechanics of the daytime stages in Sonic Unleashed and using it for the entire game. But even aside from that, this was definitely a title that the series needed at that time, and even to this day it's still very fun to play. We're also introduced to the Wisps here, and I find them quite adorable. Maybe not as adorable as the Chow, but they're still quite adorable. During my playthrough of this, I personally enjoyed it. The story's good, it played well, and I love the music, especially on Planet Wisp. Ah, it's so nice. And I have to admit, because of the wisp powers, I find myself saying, drill, spikes, rocket, and especially cube a lot. Number 7. Sonic Heroes. The first game in the Sonic series to have a multi-platform release. And this game you got 4 teams of characters teaming up together to save the day. Now, overall feelings of this game mainly depend on which version you play. For me, I played the GameCube version, which is arguably the best version of this game. Even though this game does have some issues with like glitches and whatnot, I still find it very fun to play all these years later. And you can never say no to listening to the soundtrack. It was also thanks to this game that we got to go back to having special stages and even getting to see members of the Chaotix crew from Knuckles Chaotix. Well, almost all of them. Sorry, Mighty. Whether you like Team Sonic, Team Dark, Team Rose, or Team Chaotix, there's a playstyle for everybody in this game, and what goes up must come down, even if our feet don't touch the ground. Number 6. Sonic Battle. Another one of Sonic's titles on the Game Boy Advance, separate from the Advance series, but I still find this to be a very underrated title. Some may call this game the Sonic version of Smash Bros, but honestly, I feel like this game is way more than just the fighting. I love the plot of this game, especially as we get to know more and more about the newest character in this game, Emerald. And let's be real, a good chunk of us cried at the end of this game. If you know, you know. Story and lore aside, it's just a nice fun little fighting game for folks to play. Whether you're playing as Sonic, Shadow, Rouge, Emerald, Knuckles, any of those characters. Hell, even Chaos is in this game. A nice mishmash of characters duking it out, seeing who comes out victorious. And if you haven't played through the story mode yet, I highly recommend it. It is really good. I do miss seeing Emerald though. It was pretty neat seeing him in the animated shorts for Shadow Generations though, proving that the love for this robot is still alive out there. Number 5. Sonic Adventure. Now this is where the Blue Hedgehog made us full jump to 3D. And there's a reason why this game was one of the best selling on the Dreamcast. From the multiple game modes, to the story, the music, the introduction of many new characters like Big the Cat, Gamma, the Chow, this game still remains a very fun one to play. Even if I admit some of the controls have not exactly aged the best. Still fun to play though. When this title came out, it helped put Sega back on the map after the disastrous cancellation of Sonic Extreme. So the company really needed this, and it definitely paid off. And as of the recording of this video, I'm gonna be doing my best to try and 100% it. I never could do it as a kid, but I want to do it. I'm about 10 emblems away as of this recording. Almost there. Number 4. Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Now, I admit, I could have either chosen Sonic 3 or Sonic and Knuckles separately, but it's way better just to put the two together. Brand new zones to explore, the introduction of the legendary Knuckles the Echidna, Sonic 3 and Knuckles remains very fun to play to this day, no matter which version you're playing. Fun fact, did you know that this game had a PC port going under the title Sonic and Knuckles Collection? And double fun fact, that was the first Sonic game I had ever physically owned, and I played it so much that I actually wore out the disc. Oops! I did end up getting a new copy a couple of years later, but it was still very fun to play on my computer. And triple fun fact, the songs that were heard on the PC port were actually the original ones. The songs on the Genesis are more well known, however they were not the originals. Although, many of us did not know that until many years later. And I have to admit, even though this game is very fun to play, I can only imagine it must be a bitch to get re-released, mainly because of the music copyrights, mainly involving Michael Jackson. I'm kind of bummed that he left his name uncredited here, because the work he contributed to this was really good. But aside from all that, Sonic 3 and Knuckles remains a very fun game to play to this day. Whether you play it separate or together, going for 7 emeralds or 14 emeralds, there's a way to play this for everybody. Hell yeah! moving on to number 3. Sonic Mania. After many years had passed of there being barely, if any at all, 2D Sonic titles, when this game got announced, many of us were jumping with joy. And I mean, just look at it. The pixel art is just fantastic to look at, the game controls very well, the music as always kicks ass, with special thanks to T. Lopes for this one. This was really a title that a lot of Sonic fans, myself included, were asking for a really long time. And considering the people that worked on this were fans of Sonic themselves, mwah, perfect. All nostalgia aside, this game is fantastic. Whether you've played the Genesis titles or not, I highly recommend picking this game up. Not to mention, I've seen some pretty kick-ass mods of this game going around like on Game Banana and the Steam Workshop. I even made a mod myself based off of my good friend Proton John and all the shenanigans that occurs in his community. It definitely wasn't easy to make, but it was worth it in the end. Sega, please keep hiring fans to make some games. There's some good game makers in the fandom. Now then, at number 2... Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. If there was any video game in my entire life that I've probably put the most hours into, if the GameCube had a tracker, this game would definitely be it. Ever since I was 7, I have been obsessed with this game. The speed stages with Sonic and Shadow, the shooting stages with Tails and Eggman, treasure hunting stages with Knuckles and Rouge, another game with a kick-ass soundtrack. This game has a lot. And now let's be real, most of us that have played this game growing up have probably spent most of our time in the Chow Garden, and let me just say, it is way better than Adventure 1's Chow Garden. I would come home from school, run through a stage or two, get some animals and chaos drives, and then just proceed to head straight to the Chow Garden and just play with my Chow for so many hours. Doing my homework? Nah, it's Chow time, baby! But if I'm being real, I wish Chow were real, they're so cute! Whether you go for 100% or not, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle remains a very good game to this day. No fakers around these parts, right, Shadow? Before I blast through with Sonic Speed to my number 1 choice, here are a couple honorable mentions. Last but not least, my number 1 Sonic game is... Sonic the Hedgehog 2. My grandfather had a Sega Genesis, and when he introduced me to this game at a very young age, my life would never be the same. And for very good reason. This popular sequel on the Genesis took what made the first Sonic game fantastic and multiplied it 2, 3, maybe even 4 times better. Faster speed, longer levels, the introduction to Tails, yet another kick-ass soundtrack. It's just mwah, beautiful. As a kid, my brother, cousins, and I, we spent so much time playing the 2-player mode here, and proceeded to yell at each other whenever any one of us got a teleportation item from one of the item boxes. Good times. Now, even playing this game back as an adult, some of the later zones remain a challenge still, especially like Wing Fortress, Metropolis, and even the Death Egg, but I like a good challenge. But if I'm being real, Super Mario Bros. Might have been the first video game I ever played, but it was mainly Sonic the Hedgehog 2 that helped pretty much established my love for video games. As I've said on my live streams, I owe a lot to the Blue Hedgehog here, and whenever I play Sonic 2 nowadays, I think back to my grandpa. Even at least 15 years later, I still miss him a lot. But whenever I play this game, I will always think of him for how he helped introduce me to Sonic and establish my love for the series. Thanks, Grandpa. No matter how many years pass, this game will forever be speeding through our hearts. Thank you all kindly for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to give it a like. I would greatly appreciate it. And say, while you're here, what's your favorite Sonic game? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you, and have a supersonic-filled day. Laters!